Hey, welcome back to another episode of LeaderShipping. The summer months are just around the corner. The temperatures outside are actually already on the rise. For most people in Parcel, however, it's peak season that is the most stressful stretch of the year. However, there is a certain segment in parcel shipping where the summer turns up the heat the most, and that really is in cold chain, supply chain shipping. Here on the show, we're going to get out ahead of the hottest months already by talking all things cold chain, the unique challenges that temperature-sensitive shipments face, and the best ways that you can ensure that your cold chain operates and runs smoothly. We're really stoked, and I'm excited to have our guest on. Joining us to cover this topic is an expert on all things cold chain, and that is Wesley O'Brien. Wesley, thanks so much for being on the show, man. I'm excited to chat with you.
Yeah, likewise, Caleb, and thank you for having me.
For sure. I love seeing your warehouse in the background, by the way. I'm a geek for all things supply chain, but when you talk about cold chain, where something is to be temperature controlled, that level of complexity is just kind of wild to me, and I love to see it.
It seems normal to us because it's what we have dealt with. I've dealt with it since 2003. I don't know a simpler way.
Well, I'll give people, our listeners, an understanding of your background. And if I miss anything, if you want to add any color commentary, be my guest. But Wesley is the co-founder and chief logistics officer at Frozen Logistics, which is a Texas-based 3PL. Am I understanding that right?
That's correct.
Yeah, and you guys specialize particularly within cold chain storage and temperature-controlled shipping. And I thought this was really interesting. You've got 23 years of experience in cold logistics. And if I'm understanding this right, you're a third generation meat processor in your family. Is that right?
That's correct. Well, I was.
Yeah.
So quick background. I always tell everybody, you would hear people say by birthright. I say by birth damning. I was born into a meat processing family. I quite literally learned to cut meat standing on a milk crate so that I could be high enough to the cutting table. My grandpa used to constantly brag to people that he had me out on processing floors before I could walk.
That's awesome. That's killer, right? And I think sometimes when you grow up in those environments, that the amount of knowledge that you're exposed to, that you can retain, and solutions that you can provide to others from being in that industry for as long as you have, I think obviously that's what more than likely brought you into cold chain, right?
Sure. Yeah, it did. So my family purchased a building that they had been running a commercial meat processing business out of. They still run that business to this day out of that same building. But when they bought the entirety of the building, it already had freezers, it already had coolers. Entrepreneurs don't sit still on anything anyway, so they thought, well, great, now we do cold storage. And they bought that building when I was a junior in high school in 2002. And I can remember quite vividly thinking, what the heck is cold storage? So then, graduate high school, I come into the family affairs. I had been processing meat my entire life. I was burning out.
Yeah.
But this cold storage thing was neat, and it was a good time. And they were inside the same building, and it's a single family office anyway. And so I just gravitated to it, and we started to grow it, and I started to come up with ideas that I thought would help grow it. And I got told, if you want to do that, you run it. And so that sort of naturally brought me into the management structure, and then I really started to enjoy that. Started to build a bigger business out of it, really loved the servitude of leadership in any industry.
Yeah.
That mirrored with what I already knew. It just spoke to me. So we built that into quite a business there, and that company was called Taylor Cold Storage. We filled that legacy facility up to its capacity, and it sort of was time to, take the next step. Through tons of negotiations with the family, what do you want? What do y'all want? Well, we decided the best approach was to see if I could go find a partner that would start another company with me. And so my wife and I were fortunate enough to meet with a man by the name of Ruben Cortez, who is now our CEO as well as our landlord and one of the majority owners of the company. And we started what is Frozen Logistics, and we thought, okay, what do we want to do with that, and how do we want to participate in this industry, and where do we want our niche to exist? And the framework that we came up with was we are an omni-channel provider. We offer a full suite of business-to-business services, but what we love to focus on is direct consumer, perishable, and frozen shipping.
Yeah.
And hopefully that provides a little bit of background that kind of gets us back to current.
Oh, it totally does. We've got you know, a number of clients, on the sifted side and other businesses that I'm really familiar with that ship perishable, temperature sensitive shipments. And I think that there's like the obvious ones that are like, oh, I ship frozen steaks, and if they arrive not frozen, if they're arriving thawed out and have been sitting in a 95-degree van for X number of hours or days, that's going to totally spoil. But you've also got a whole subgroup where the shipments need to be protected somehow, and the transit time, the insulation, the refrigeration materials, etc., all really matter. But what goes into deciding how to ship something to ensure that it doesn't spoil? And do some shippers like kind of deal with that as the summer months heat up, or is this a year-round thing that a lot of shippers will focus on?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting question. In one word for us is test. We test to launch any new shipping programs, and then we continually reiterate those tests in as a real world environment as we can. Maybe we're sending a shipping to a preferred customer that's willing to give us some feedback, or basically we run our own chamber test. Essentially, we don't have a chamber; we just put it out in the real world, and it's we have fun with it. We tell our guys, when you walk by that box, give it a little kick. Well, why would we do that? Well, because UPS is going to make it look like the opening scene of Ace Ventura anyway, so we have to know what's actually going to happen here. But we test, and then we test again, and we do have different matrices for different parts of the year. And then what is the requirement of the item? So you talked about steaks. Ice cream is another one that often comes up. People ask me, what's the hardest thing to ship? Perishable. And I say milk. And they go, well, why wouldn't it be ice cream? I'm like, well, because ice cream has one temperature concern.
Yeah.
I can't let it get hot. Yeah, right. But milk has a bottom and a top. And that doesn't always obviously dawn on people that it's actually simpler for us to ship something frozen. Now, it may be more expensive, but it's simpler because it's just how much refrigerant inside of what material for how many days in transit, what is the weather going to be, how long do we estimate it's going to sit on the porch before it is picked up. And when you can solve that, you just can add more refrigerant and make a bigger box.
Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting. I had wrongly assumed what a lot of people assumed, as you said, like it's the items that need to remain frozen are the most difficult to ship. In reality, you're talking about it being it can't be above this temperature, it can't be below this temperature, and it has to stay in this nice little happy Goldilocks zone that keeps it as fresh as possible. And I think that's really interesting. When you're talking to individual shippers that are out there and you're running these tests, what are the most important pieces of data for cold chain shippers to track? And how do you measure success? Obviously, if the food is spoiled, or if something, tragically happens with the item that you're shipping, that's one method. But I'm assuming there's a lot of other data that you're looking at to determine what does success look like.
Yeah, no, there certainly is. There's tons of metrics that we need, but the most important ones are simply like any simple graph. It has two intersecting points, and that's time and temperature. So at what time in that box does it reach a failed temperature? So the way that we do that is very simple. We put a data logger in the box. We set the box outside. We leave it closed until we know for sure it's failed. Somebody puts a clothespin on their nose, and they go and open that box. We pull that data logger, we plug it in, and we see at what point did it meet its failure. Yeah. And determining what its failure is sometimes a little bit of a challenge too, and that takes a little bit of testing as well. You mentioned a steak in this conversation. If a steak is slightly slacked in transit, most people will accept that. If ice cream has slightly slacked in transit, it is ruined. So there's even variances inside that. But then what are the other metrics we need to know? What was the material we were testing in? And even that can get very complicated. molded styrofoam coolers are the best performer that we know of to date in direct consumer shipping, but what is the R value of that molded styrofoam cooler? Because they're not all the same. They're not the same thickness. If you are buying something that is thicker, are you giving up inner dimension or outer dimension?
Yeah.
It can just keep going. But if you're asking me what's the most important thing is when did it fail? And if that wasn't long enough, we're adding refrigerant, and now we're going to see when it failed. And if that wasn't long enough, we're just going to continue to do that until we figure out what that is. And what we have found, what we have gotten better at, is actually minimizing refrigerant needed, because anybody can overdo it. And that's a simple thing to do, just overdo it. The key is, I want you to get your product completely frozen at your doorstep with about 4 ounces of dry ice left, right? Like, then we nailed it.
Yeah,
There's enough dry ice in there for you to see it was there. The product is solidly frozen. Nobody wasted any dollars that didn't need to be spent, and we're in great shape.
Yeah, and I think from a sustainability aspect, overdoing it in terms of packaging, in terms of refrigerant, in terms of anything that's ending back up in the landfill, not only from a sustainability aspect is like poor behavior, but it's also costly.
Oh, man.
I bet most shippers that are shipping some level of cold chain, what they're sending out on a per piece, per package item for insulation, box thickness, refrigerant, etc., is going to be in a spot where, you're shipping, a next door neighbor that's shipping out socks,
Right.
make it look like it's child's play next to it, right? It's a whole another level of complexity. Yeah, that you're totally right. And I love that. Like, hey, if we've got 4 ounces left of dry ice, we've nailed it. And I think
Right.
that's the right way to do it. It sounds like the best way to do that is just test.
Yeah, so it is interesting that you brought that up, because one of the subsidiaries that is our main focus and what we feel like is the absolute future of our business is DeliveredCold. And what we've made with DeliveredCold, and I won't steer too far away, is a marketplace and a logistics center. We've combined the two of them. And essentially what that allows us to do is allow a consumer to buy across products and put it into one box, and allow a seller to sell with no minimum quantities because we're putting it inside that one box. But to circle back around to what we started with here, we fully believe in sustainability. We can't do this wastefully. So that promotes that sustainability, because what we don't have to do is make a box for each seller, put refrigerant in for each seller,
Yeah.
manage a shipping label for each seller. So, as the conversation evolves and we talk a little bit more about what DeliveredCold is, I think you'll see more and more that's exactly what we're thinking. What you see already is exactly what we see, and exactly the complexities that we see need to be solved.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so funny. Like, in preparation for this conversation, I think it's one of those things that it's out of sight, out of mind. If you don't do cold supply chain, and you don't have a need for it, you're not watching it or looking for it. Versus, like, most people order from Amazon, or they order something from a website and it gets delivered UPS or FedEx. 95% of most Americans are not necessarily receiving cold shipments on a regular basis, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist and it's not out there and it's not an absolute need or benefit. But in preparation for this, I coach my littlest son's lacrosse team, and we, for the final game, brought popsicles. And it was one of those, like, okay, how do I keep these popsicles frozen for more than 3 hours on a hot field? And it just kind of struck me that I was like, oh, this is perfectly timed for my conversation.
Sure.
Not only, like, how do I keep it frozen for 3 hours on a field that's 20 minutes from my house, but if I were to ship that across the country over multiple days and thousands of miles of transit in varying conditions, and you mentioned that Ace Ventura scene, which is hilarious, of the UPS driver, Ace dressed as that, just completely decimating that box upon delivery. And to have it arrive in perfect shape is a whole nother level of complexity that kind of blows my mind. And it's pretty incredible that you guys can do it. No wonder testing and having the right facility with the right equipment makes all the difference.
It does, yeah. I mean, one of the biggest commitments we made to the direct consumer perishable model is dry ice production. We do it right here on site. We have enough equipment to make 30 to 50,000 pounds a day if needed. We have a lot of redundancy in our liquid storage so that if either prices change or supply becomes hard to put your hands on, we have some buildup there. So, but that sort of stuff is very important, but it is also creates barriers to entry. If you're going to go invest in equipment like that, then you have to push enough volume out the door to make the economies of scale work. So it does, but again, I don't know that it's any more or less complicated than brick and mortar distribution that four different entities have to touch before it's shelved. It's just different. It's just what we deal with.
It is different, and I think with the right facility, the right know-how, the right testing, and I would think working with extremely knowledgeable professionals like yourself, it makes the world of difference, right? It makes it or breaks it. And I think not everybody has a ton of margin in their product. How do you nail it so that you aren't overcompensating on whether it's packaging or the price of the product or refrigerant, etc. To actually deliver this?
Do you mind if I answer that as delivered cold?
Please do.
Okay, and the reason why is because the way that we accomplish unit cost economics in delivered cold is on the sales side, we push to the biggest box we have, plus we keep a buffer box, right? So we push to say the large, but we also have an extra large just in case we missed it, in case the algorithm was a little bit off. But after the sale has been accomplished, now we shrink to the smallest box possible. So
Cool.
so how do we accomplish it? Multiple sizes.
Yeah.
But you don't want 10 sizes because you want to be able to buy every one of your sizes on truckload volumes so that you have more unit cost economics. But the way we're doing it is we're maximizing the cubic footage in the sale, and then we're minimizing the cubic footage in the logistics.
Well, I'm curious for final piece of advice to anyone that's listening right now that needs shipping, whether that's cold products or something that is just time set or temperature sensitive during hot months. What would be your advice for anybody that's listening right now?
That, that's a very, very deep question because where are you at in your business life cycle? So let's make an assumption that you are brand new. Then you have two approaches. You can ship the stuff yourself until you hit enough scale to where you think you can go to a third party, or you can go straight to a third party and you have to understand that you're going to run at a loss leader until you hit a certain volume. Obviously, that's going to be my recommendation. I need your business. But I also think that's the best way to go because I'll tell you what my company is no good at is manufacturing food. We don't even think twice about it. I don't know the complexities around taking 7 inputs and getting them into one package. I'm sure it's complex. I don't know how to do it. I'll let you focus on that. But what we know how to do is get your product to an end user. So what I mean by that is how many businesses do you want to solve at one time? Because these are two different industries. The production of food is one industry. Shipping it direct to consumer is another industry. My recommendation is you find a good partner who, by having multiple customers, can pass on some of those economies of scale to you. Even let's say I had a customer who said, well, I can buy a truckload of boxes so I can match your price. My response is, great. How many sizes can you buy at a truckload volume? And they're like, well, just one. And I'm like, right, but I'm looking on your website and you have 8 bundles. Yes. So how many box sizes do you need? Well, I need 3. Okay, well, then you don't have enough volume to buy all 3 at a truckload. So having the right 3PL partner that's focused on what they're doing will help you gain that scale and control those cogs. But the other side of the coin is, like, do you want enough brand control up front that you're willing to lose the money just to do it yourself so that you know you're owning your brand? That's an okay way to do it too. You need to know what your exit is, because what you cannot do is ship at volume and manufacture at volume. Not simply, not easily. Not many people can accomplish that.
Yeah, and that's the power of having a really strong 3PL in your back pocket, is that it's not necessarily giving up this autonomy to control your brand. When you select the right 3PL partner, they're an extension of your brand.
They can do it better than you can.
Yeah, and I think that idea of, hey, look, I don't manufacture food. This is what I do extremely well. Let's have you focus on what you do extremely well and give me what I I can knock out of the park for you,
Mm.
which I think is great advice. I think that's awesome.
I think in most industries you have to understand, uh, if you let yourself get focused on too many things, you won't be focused on anything. And it can become
Yeah.
extremely problematic. And again, the complexities that it takes to manufacture food seem like hurdles I would never want to cross. But when I tell people what I do, they're like, "You are crazy." I'm like, "Oh, I think it's just, whatever suffering we're willing to accept and try to solve." But we love the challenges, and we love things with barriers of entry as long as they have a market opportunity on the backside. And that's what I think we have now. And I think that that market really accelerated through the pandemic. And the good news about once the market exists, the solutions will come.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I think I'm a big believer that anything can be shipped. You can get anything. We have come so far as a society, as a group, from technology and whatnot. Anything can be shipped and delivered. Just look at Amazon's amazing kind of infrastructure of 1 to 2 day delivery. Soon to be just 1 day or same day delivery for everybody. I think that there's just amazing things that you can accomplish when you have the right partner. And I think brands need to understand that there are really strong partners out there for them that are an extension of their business. Well, awesome, Wesley. Thank you so much for joining the show. I really appreciate it. Let us know, or let our listeners know, where they can get in touch with you. The floor is yours.
Yeah, sure. So you can visit us at frozenlogistics.com, and there's places to make inquiry there. I recommend anybody that has a frozen consumer packaged good that they sell at a retail level, go to DeliveredCold.com and look around and see what we're doing there, because it's what we're really excited about. And again, there's places to reach out on DeliveredCold's website. My email address is simply wesley@frozenlogistics.com. I can be reached there. I'm looking at it right now. It's always seems to be in front of me. But yeah, I mean, like I said, we're firm believers in direct consumer frozen and perishable shipping. It's what we think the future of this industry is, and would love to talk to anybody that needs help at any point along their journey.
Well, thanks so much, Wesley, for being a part of the show. It's been a pleasure to chat.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Well, thanks again for listening. For LeaderShipping, we want you to subscribe, comment, rate the show. Tell us what you liked, what you didn't like. It really helps us out in kind of determining the type of content and value that we can continue to provide on this. You can also subscribe to us on any podcast platform to find more episodes. We've got a lot of really great conversations. You can also learn more about sifted.com by checking us out. We've got great resources on our website, like blogs or monthly newsletter, some helpful guides and research and more. And as always, thanks for listening and happy shipping.